Are you looking to sharpen your budgeting skills? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast, where we talk about life, family, and how to afford it. And now, the Budget Couple themselves, Nate and Danielle.
Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I'm Danielle.
And this week, we're going to talk about your questions. We had a bunch of questions come in, and we greatly appreciate it, and we want to take time to answer them because there's some really good ones, and we're excited about kind of going through and talking about budgeting. That's why we started this podcast. But before we do that, we'd always like to encourage you, if you could, please leave a review on your podcast player or listener of choice. I use Apple Podcast or Overcast. Either one of those really help us out in being able to reach more people, and we really thank you for all the reviews we've gotten so far.
Thanks again, you guys, for your questions, and we really do appreciate it. You know, we've had some comments, I hope this question isn't too simple, but seriously, nothing is too simple or too weird. Whatever, we are willing to tackle anything, so thanks again. So we'll start with the first one here from Virginia. This question is about how many bank accounts you should have. So she noted in her question that we have a lot of different categories, and we've talked about our categories before, and we do have a lot. I think it added up to 17 at one point.
Something like that. It was a lot. Let's go with that.
So we are pretty anal about our budget, and we have a lot of categories to keep track of, but we do not have multiple bank accounts for those. We just have one checking and one savings account. That's it. Of course, we have our retirement accounts, but those are completely separate.
And we can't even touch those right now if we wanted to, without facing major tax problems, which we don't want to deal with.
Absolutely not. So we have a checking and a savings. The checking, of course, is where all of our income goes, our direct deposit paychecks. Savings, right now, we only keep our crash fund in that. Our crash fund is $15,000. And just to go back a little bit, I think we talked about this in one of the way earlier podcasts. You should have somewhere between 3 and 6 months expenses in your crash fund. So you think about what your income is, what your expenses are, and just make sure that you can survive if one or both of you lose a job for about 3 to 6 months at a time.
Right. So again, we only have two bank accounts at the same bank. We have a checking account to pay bills from and where our income goes into. And then our other one is a savings account that sits untouched and is there for our emergency fund and occasionally money that we want to hold on to if we're doing something like, let's say we're going to go buy a car and we need a down payment. We'll put it in savings just to hold it on to there. But it's not a long-term thing. That's there just as a vehicle to hold on to it.
And we'll get into that a bit more soon here. So going back to all those categories that we have, those are for us to just keep track of where our money is going. So, and we've mentioned this before, good or bad, we put everything on our credit card. So we each have a credit card, though that's not necessary at all. It's just for convenience and habit.
Yeah, you really don't need a credit card. You can use a debit card. You can pay with checks. You could use cash. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a way to pay your bills, pay your expenses, that's what it is. Our choice is a credit card. Yours may be different. It's not important. What is important is you know what you're spending where, and that's where the budget kind of comes in here.
So one of the reasons that we like a credit card is it just allows some amount of freedom for when you're spending your money. So we know exactly what's coming in. We get biweekly paychecks. We'll get about 4, maybe 5, depending on the month, per month. And we know exactly what's going to end up in our account at the end of each month. Now, we won't always have that money until we get that paycheck, of course. So using the credit card, we can kind of buy whatever we want at any point in the month, and we don't have to worry about what's in our checking account. The caveat of that is that we always know what our limits are because of the budget that we set up previously. So yes, we're spending kind of whatever we want throughout the month, but we know exactly what those limits are. We know exactly what our credit card bill is going to be at the end of the month. So we know we have enough to pay for it, essentially.
Right. So again, all of our bills minus our mortgage, utilities, the things that cannot be paid with a credit card because it's not allowed, everything else is bought and paid for on our credit card. So at the end of the month, we pay off each of our credit cards, and that money comes from our checking account. And that checking account is where all of our income is deposited into. So it's kind of just lining up, and it just allows us to streamline our payments. Instead of making a whole bunch of little payments and keeping track of all of those over our debit card statements, we just go into our credit card. We make one payment each month on our credit card, comes out of our checking account. and we're good to go as far as our total money goes. Now, if there's problems with that, if we go over or something's a problem, we can dive into our credit card and figure out exactly what the problem is. But generally, we've been pretty good about that over the past few months, so it hasn't been an issue.
We really are, and like Nate said, we try to be good at writing everything down. So of course, some of the bills are going to stay exactly the same each month. Those are those line items in our budget that don't change. But then you have the personal expenses where we, could potentially get carried away. Nate and I, maybe one of us goes out to eat too much for a month.
That's me.
No, not necessarily. I love eating out too.
But I'm the one who goes over budget the most. So if this falls on somebody, it's definitely me.
So that's that caveat where, it works for us to use a credit card. But at the same time, if you're not keeping track of what you're spending on the credit card on your budget, then you could get into trouble.
Very, very easily. And I've done it, I think, 3 major times where I've gone way overboard. I think in our relationship, it's been, I've really gotten trouble with that. But again, it's a matter of habit and building that habit. And the faster you go through and just try to push through and do stuff, even though it's hard and even though it's not that much fun all the time, the fun comes when you see that it actually worked, because it really does work if you put in the work to do it. It's great.
Becomes second nature a little bit, at least for me, where you buy something and I just go right into again, we use Google Sheets. We did try EveryDollar, but we stick with our Google Sheets. It works for us. So as soon as I buy something, I pull up my Google Sheets app on my phone and I just plug the number in. I just, I write a quick note about what I spent it on, and that's it. And the way we have our our Google Sheets spreadsheet set up is it automatically just minuses from what we have left that month. So it's pretty simple, pretty easy. And as long as you just remember to do that after each purchase, it keeps track of everything.
And Virginia had one other question that is going to kind of be a two-parter, because we had a very similar question from another listener. So we're going to answer part of it and then go into the other question that another listener had and kind of answer it more fully. But more setting aside things that you pay for once every couple of months or maybe even once a year. Do we put that money towards a monthly amount that sits in checking, sits in savings until the payments due? Or kind of what do we do with that? And right now, we don't do this. It's a really good idea, but we just don't do it. We are lucky and very fortunate in the fact that we have enough money each month left over that we normally throw in the house, that if we have one of those expenses pop up, we can cover it that month. So it's not terrifying to us in that sense. But what is terrifying is that we see that we're supposed to be able to put an extra, let's say, $2,000 on the house each month. And when our car insurance is due, well, now we can only put an extra $1,000 that month. So we didn't hit our goal because we're short $1,000 on what we wanted to do. So it's because those longer term expenses aren't well tracked in our budgeting currently that we don't do that. If you don't have a cushion, there are plenty of options that you can do. And that's going to lead us into a similar question from listener Samantha.
And I'll say that we do know people that track it, over the course of the year and such. Our parents are, his parents
crazy about that.
Are one of them, and it is probably a good idea. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We have an email from Samantha that really leads in well to this question. So she said, you talk about putting money aside into your saving for various items. Do you keep track of how much is in your savings for each item? So for example, $500 for travel, $200 for car expenses, $300 for gifts, et cetera, et cetera. Easy answer to that. No, we're not doing it right now.
No, but we're really looking at doing it because I think we're getting a little bit more frustrated that we're not hitting our goals the way that we wanted to or the way that we planned on.
We're just having a better idea of how much in reality we're able to put towards the house extra each month. Because yes, we have that cushion. And so we're always able to deal with those extra expenses, but it does mess up our plans when we're thinking, okay, how much longer before we pay off this house? And we're not keeping the same amount each month. So that's getting hard for us. So we are thinking about change.
I think we're making a mindset change in as far as the budget being the ideal version to the budget being much more of a realistic version of what every month is. Because for our entire relationship, we've had a very idealized budget. If everything goes right, if we do everything exactly right, this is what we should have. And that's very often not the case because the world's not an ideal place and our budget isn't set up to be ideal, or our budget's not set up to give us success in that area.
So if you don't have a cushion, then one way to deal with these extra expenses that come up is to try to make some sort of estimate, and maybe a yearly estimate. So choose the extra items that you want to deal with. Say it's car insurance, say it's car maintenance like oil changes and such. Maybe you know that you're going to have to replace your oven that year. Anything like that. And honestly, I would throw in there things like birthdays. You say that you have about 5 people a year that you want to buy birthday gifts for, and you usually spend an average of 100. So you need 500 a year for birthdays. So think about those sort of things. Try and add that up for over the course of a year, and then divide it by 12. That would be the amount that you would theoretically want to put in your savings account each month to make sure that you always have that cushion available when something does come up. The caveat with this is that if you're just getting started with it, you might not have enough money when the first thing comes up. So say you want to get started with this and you do it for a couple months and then you have car insurance come up. You don't have enough in your savings set aside yet for the car insurance. So it is the type of thing that takes some time to get going. If you do know some big expense is coming up, maybe you cushion a little heavier for the first couple months, and then you kind of get into a routine after that.
Yeah. Our historic kind of issue with budgeting, or our experience with budgeting, has been that it takes about 3 months or so to get the budget fine-tuned where it's going to be working for you pretty well. I don't know how long this one's going to take to fine-tune to get right. That's something that we're definitely going to be exploring because it's something that we need to figure out. And I think we're both ready to start tackling that aspect of our budget and get it fine-tuned to the point where we have a realistic budget every month.
And I'm thinking actually just as we're talking, for us, it would even help to start simple and just for the big things like car insurance and life insurance, which isn't actually that big, but just maybe those 2 insurances. We know what months we pay them. So we
know how much they are. I mean, car insurance is about $1,400 a year, which makes me angry and makes me shiver a little bit. And then health or life insurance is roughly $350 a year between the two of us, $400 a year.
Very cheap and very worth it.
Yes, please do that. We'll talk about that in a different episode. But that works out to about $125 to $150 a month that we should be setting aside to cover those expenses. Now, luckily, we just paid our car insurance, so we have time to build up that amount of money to pay it off. And we also just paid our life insurance, so we have that kind of time to build up. So this might be the time to do it.
It might be. And so if we just start simple with that insurance and then, smaller things, oil changes, birthdays, incorporate that into the budget of the month that it's coming up. So maybe it's your mom's birthday that month. Just instead of having some random miscellaneous category like what we have now, go ahead and build that into the budget that month. So at least that way you know what you're ending with. So that way we would know at that month that, okay, we're going to have a little less to put towards the house. But for us, it really is just a matter of knowing and being realistic rather than having a certain expectation.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do. We really want it to be a realistic version of what we're doing, how we're spending our money, and I think it's going to help us. And we'll document the journey, we'll help share that, and we'll tell you exactly how it goes for us. But I think that's all we have for today's episode. And I just want to mention 2 other things. One, we did not forget about the budget apps. We've gotten really bad about using them. We will go back. We're going to be taking a look at You Need a Budget. It's an app that you can use to track your budget and a whole bunch of other things. We are going to be taking a look at that next month. So we'll go through and use it for a whole month and see how we like it. And also, we're going to go take a look at some listener questions coming up here soon so that we can go through and answer those. But we're also going to be starting a series of building a budget from the beginning. So we're going to take a look at each aspect of our budget, how we came up with the decisions we did, and build from there. So we're going to walk you through because a lot of the questions we get are from people new to budgeting. And we want to kind of go step by step and show you why we did what we did, how we did what we did, and kind of where we came from. It's not going to be super exhaustive, super long, maybe an episode or 3, somewhere in that range, but just a basic step-by-step guide to how to set up your budget to be successful and how to work for you. So that's all we have for this week. If you have any questions, please shoot them to us over at budgetcouple.com. And notes for this episode can be found at budgetcouple.com/episode 21.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Budget Couple Podcast with your hosts, Nate and Danielle. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit budgetcouple.com. Make sure to check out the next episode of the Budget Couple Podcast, where we'll talk more about life, family, and how to afford it. We'll catch you next time.